you know, I know I'm going to forget someone. We kind of, a few more showed up, and that's just great for us, but some dignitaries that are, everyone here is a dignitary, but some in the audience that I'd like to especially recognize. We have with us today Senators Paul Scott and Senator Racino, newly elected Senator Racino, if you all wouldn't mind standing. Some of my own commissioners, Commissioner Dave Amos, representing the 5th Congressional District, and Commissioner Putnam, I just saw you walk in, is an at-large member, yes, sitting right to my right. And some special guests flew all the way from Vance, I think, really quick. I need to probably, Commissioner, can we work on an aircraft in our agency? It'd be really nice, one of these back here. Anyway, Lieutenant Colonel, I'm going to pronounce this wrong probably, and she'll tell me how to say it. Deidre Curry and Captain Christine Durham from that. 2 pilots, okay, helping us with the pilot shortage in the Air Force. And really, and I think Senator Pugh just walked in. Okay, so, gee, could you guys work out the budget issue while you're here? There's 3 of you here. I mean, between you 3, I think you could get it done. Now, you add in only 145, it's probably a problem. But so thank you, Senator Pugh, for bringing your 2 young, lovely ladies in aviation. Do you want to come over here and take this over? It'd be really, you could help me out. But I want to, I think probably this is going to be everybody, but all the women that are in aviation and aerospace today, please rise. Don't be bashful. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Now, Sandra said I had a few minutes, so I'll try to make this quick, but you really gotta, Sandra, some of you I know have talked to Sandra Shelton on my staff. She is the major architect of this. And I tell you got to hand it to her and to Pearl Carter Scott, because they made sure to have this on a day when college game day really doesn't matter any longer. So, I mean, okay, Sandra, so I've read what you told me to say. Now where do I go from here? Just recently, we commemorated the 76th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. That was a very painful and tragic lesson, but we've never forgotten and we never will. I think it's fair to say we're probably all Paul Reveres today. That singular event probably brought us together like maybe no other event in our history. It was very exceptional in that regard, and it certainly took that for us to defeat the Axis powers, and probably, I don't know, that may have been the Antichrist. But that would not have been possible. No way that would have been possible without the women who stepped up and came into our military and into our factories, where we came to refer to them as Rosie the Riveter. Indeed, my own grandmother was a teacher, and she left to go to work for North American Aviation in Fort Worth, Texas. Better paying job. Don't worry, legislators, I'm not going there. And my mother-in-law was she was one of the first 1,000 female pilots in the United States, and then became a lieutenant commander in the Navy in World War II. So I imagine you all pretty impressed by that. That was fairly exceptional, which means she was a major if she was in the Army or the Air Force today. To acquire that rank was pretty exceptional. But here in Oklahoma, we made our own contribution in that regard. We had 2 Douglas aircraft factories, and they were actually identical. A lot of folks don't realize when they were built, certainly. They've changed since then. One was here, one was in Tulsa. And here, we produced 5,000 C-47s, the military version of the DC-3, which changed commercial aviation, of course, forever. 5,000, that was half the number of those that were produced right here in Oklahoma City. Over in Tulsa, at that Douglas plant, we produced 615 A-24 Banshees, the Army version of the Dauntless dive bomber, 962 B-24 Liberators, and 1,343 A-26 Invaders. No wonder it was called the bomber plant. That's what Tulsans called it. No way that's possible, any of that, because our men had to go fight. And by the way, like my mother-in-law, women did too. But where they really, really made that major contribution was probably every one of those aircraft I just mentioned was touched by many women and made it possible to assemble those aircraft. Our legacy, I talk about it a lot in Oklahoma, our aviation legacy, it's very rich. It is indeed something we should be very proud of. I always, Clyde Cessna started here. Took him a lot of times to get up, but he finally did after 14 tries. Maybe that's why he moved to Enid, I don't know. Two of the first commercial airlines were started here. Safeway, Fast, Air Express by Earl Halliburton, and Braniff by a couple of guys. And by the way, their first flight was flown by Paul Braniff. It was between Oklahoma City and Tulsa. He went over to Tulsa, and it was late coming back because of storms. So Sea Chase, it started way back then. Americans doing better now than back then. And both those airlines became part of, by the way, a fledgling airline known as American Airways. Business aviation started here. It really did. There were guys like Bill Skelly and Earl Halliburton and a guy named Frank Phillips. Hey, we can get faster. We can get to our oil fields a lot faster if we'll use Wiley Post to fly us. And of course, Wiley Post. Guy that discovered the jet stream, invented the first spacesuit really so he could discover the jet stream, and the first solo around the world in unbelievably 7 days and 19 hours. But when you consider the record at that time was held by a Zeppelin and it took it 21 days, Wiley was setting the world on fire. No question about it. Amazing though how we take it for granted today. We can go to Will Rogers, we can go to Tulsa International, get on a plane and be to Singapore in 14 hours. And we just take that for granted. And we know it's going to happen safely because we have the safest air transportation system in the world. So, pretty incredible legacy. Well, women were significant in our legacy too. We're celebrating on Pearl Carter Scott's birthday, but several women made significant contributions. Bessie Coleman. Anybody in here heard of Bessie Coleman? Now, maybe I hope that wasn't from what I wrote in the brochure for today, but Bessie attended Langston. She was the first woman of African American descent, the first woman of Native American descent to become a pilot in 1921. And it didn't stop her that she had to go to France to get that pilot's license. Doors were kind of closed here to African Americans, Native Americans, and women insofar as that particular pursuit. Mary Halza started at Spartan Aircraft Company. She was a test pilot. She set a lot of speed records. She was the second woman to have a commercial pilot license in the United States. Then, of course, Pearl Carter Scott. She brings us together today. She had a pretty good flight instructor, a fellow named Wiley Post. She was the youngest pilot in the United States with her first solo at 13 years old in 1929. Jerry Cobb, pretty incredible record by Jerry Cobb. She was flying by 12. She was commercial rated by 18. She set speed, distance, and altitude records for commander aircraft. Should be of some significance to you, Commissioner Amos. Woman of the Year for the Women's National Aeronautics Association. In 1960, she was selected by NASA for the Mercury program. She actually scored higher on many of the tests than people like Gordon Cooper. And we love Gordon, an Okie, more astronauts per capita than any other state right here in Oklahoma. But because of, without question, the gender barrier back then, she was not selected to be one of the original Mercury 7 astronauts. All this great legacies, today we can be really proud, all of us, about aviation and aerospace in Oklahoma. It's the second largest industry in our state. second only to oil and gas. I'll take, go ahead to the applause line. The stats are really good though. $44 billion annual economic activity, 206,000 jobs it supports, an $11.7 billion payroll, and the average salary in aviation and aerospace today, $73,300. Military makes up $19.3 billion of that. Thank you, military. Off-airport businesses, about 837, make up $13.9 billion of that. And our airports, our 109 airports in the Oklahoma airport system, make up $10.6 billion of that. There's no question today our industry, this is certainly women have significantly contributed to that. You look at what the women in aviation and aerospace today, and they stand on the shoulders of these giants of the past, and certainly I have not mentioned them all. But when you look around today, two of our most recent FAA administrators, Jane Garvey, Marion Blakey, then right here in Oklahoma City, our current director of the Michelin Aeronautics Center, Michelle Coppage, her immediate predecessor, Lindy Ritz, and closer, maybe a little, somewhat, I didn't mention Shannon Lucid. Boy, would I've gotten in trouble. One of our most famous astronauts from Oklahoma. But closer and with us today, longtime chair of the Tulsa Airport Authority, Mary Smith. Glad to have you here, Mary. And then Meredith Siegfried, President and CEO of NORDAM, one of known around the world for its work in aviation and aerospace. So it's without the contributions of women, I don't think we'd be where we are, without question. Perhaps Margaret Thatcher has to say this about politics. In politics, if you want anything said, ask a man. If you want anything done, ask a woman. That may not be. Now, remember that, senators? That was Margaret Thatcher. She may have a point. No, I'm just kidding. But could you say that about aviation and aerospace? Well, probably, I don't know if I'd go that far, but women have been invaluable throughout the history of aviation and aerospace in this country. It is my pleasure I'm going to announce the next speaker. Sandra's giving me to wrap it up. She's going to gong me here. Our next speaker is Senator Paul Scott. What I am most appreciative of Senator Scott about is he really was the driving force, along with Sandra, from my agency to establish Pearl Carter Scott, establish this day to celebrate the contributions of women in aviation and aerospace in Oklahoma on Pearl Carter Scott's birthday, a very fitting day. Why was this important? Right now we're very fortunate, I say it particularly for this part, we have a very, very friendly governor insofar as aviation and aerospace. She is a pilot. She has supported aviation and aerospace her entire political career. There's no question we probably could have gotten some kind of special commemoration or something for this. She would have done that in a heartbeat, but she won't always be here. In fact, her time's coming to a close. So it's kind of important that we get this in statute, that it's going to be right there in the law books, which can be changed, but I don't know if the legislature will ever change this one. And I really appreciate Senator Scott for leading the way and making sure that we have this to celebrate every year. And we know you all will be back, and I think next year it'll be in Tulsa, and we'll announce more about that as the program progresses. Senator Scott?
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming out today, and it's my honor and privilege to be able to be here and to spend time with you guys today and to see a lot of the wonderful aircraft that we have here today to view and to look at. Channel 9, like they said, is here. I saw him landing. That was pretty amazing. Helicopters are pretty cool too. Have our young ladies here, the pilots from Vance. Thank you for being here. I have twin daughters that are here with me today. And that's very true. If you want something done, then ask a woman, and they'll definitely get it done for you. I didn't want to take all the credit. I've heard senators mentioned today, but we have our Honorable Representative Tammy West here with us today, and her husband, John. So I want to also recognize them. Well, Sandra only gave me about 30 minutes to speak, so no, I'm just kidding. Today I get the privilege of talking about Pearl Carter Scott. Sandra approached me about some legislation. I'm a freshman senator. I still don't have a whole lot of idea of what's going on, along with a few of the others, like Senator Pugh here. We're both kind of rookies at this, but we're trying to do the best we can with what we've got. So, Sandra approached me about carrying legislation about recognizing women in aviation. And like I said, having my wife of 29 years and then having my daughters, I was more than happy to do that and to recognize what women have done in the field of aviation and aeronautics, not only in Oklahoma, but in the country and around the world. Oklahoma Women in Aviation Aerospace Day is declared today, December 9th, annually in Oklahoma, due to Senate Bill 230. This day marks the birthday of famous Oklahoma aviator, Eula Pearl Carter Scott from Marlow, Oklahoma. That's in my district. I live in Duncan. My name being Scott as well. I don't know of any relation of Pearl and myself. I did have an Aunt Pearl, and her name was Pearl Scott as well, but it wasn't the flying Pearl Scott. So I'm going to do a little research, though. That'd be really neat if we were related somewhere down the line. But that's her today. December 9th is her birthday, and that's why we wanted to make today the Women in Aviation Day. After learning how to drive at the age of 12, Scott soared to new heights and learned to fly at the age of 13 under legendary aviator Wiley Post. She became the youngest pilot in the United States with her first solo flight on September 12, 1929. She later worked as a stunt pilot. There's a movie out that the Chickasaws have put out. That's a really amazing movie. If you haven't had opportunity to see that yet, you ought to take the opportunity. But it shows some of her. I'm sure they embellish some of it, but they have her flying stunts and things might go wrong. But she's always pushing the envelope, to entertain the people at her stunt shows. In 1960. There were only 1 in 21,417 women held an other than student pilot certificate. By 1980, the ratio had become 1 in 4,224, the best representation of female pilots within the general population ever. Today, to have a chance to randomly meet a female pilot, as we have some here today, you would have to meet over 5,000 women to meet a pilot. So they're a pretty rare commodity, and I hope that's changing. While most industries have made significant efforts to attract the female customer in the last few decades, the aviation industry is still lacking. In Oklahoma, we have Boeing, which is a huge company here. We also have Tinker Air Force Base. Senator Pugh got us the opportunity, the privilege of touring Tinker Air Force Base and seeing that. I'd never actually been on the base. I went to X-ray school at Rose State College, and I always saw the base. I used to go watch the jets take off and land when I was bored because I just had a fascination with the jets. But it is truly an amazing gem for Oklahoma to have Tinker here, to have Vance here. We have Altus Air Force Base. I mean, we have several Air Force bases here in Oklahoma. So aviation needs to be a priority in Oklahoma. And I hope as we move forward that we can attract more people to the industry, and especially more women to get involved in aviation and becoming pilots. That's kind of all I have today. I appreciate you for having me here as your guest, and look forward to meeting several of y'all today. Thank you.
Slater. I'm the General Aviation Manager for the City of Oklahoma City, and I'm the manager of Wiley Post Airport. We are thrilled to have all of you here, and we're honored to host this first event of the Women in Aviation Day. I'm honored to have all of the legislators present and all of our guests, and it is a pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Erin. Erin is an accomplished writer and an awesome pilot. She has, golly, I've lost my train of thought for some reason. I don't know what just distracted me. She has had a career in corporate aviation. She's been a flight instructor, and she, midway through her career, as many of us as women have had, she had a distraction along the way, and her path changed a little bit, and she started writing and is going to share with us some of her trials and tribulations through the course of her journey, and I look very forward to hearing those. And without further ado, Erin.
I'm here to talk to you about some sort of notion, and that's a notion of being the one. But before I tell you what the one is, let me tell you what it isn't. Being the one has nothing to do with gender, or race, or background. Being the one is actually a human thing. In my mind, the one is an expert in the field, someone who is sure-footed in their skills, with a yearning to be better, an individual with an insatiable desire to not only succeed personally, but to also elevate the group around them. The one is someone who puts mission before ego, a visionary that learns from the past but doesn't cling to it, who is always looking forward but keeps steadfast eyes on the horizon line, a seeker that seeks potential ahead of all obstacles and takes advantage of all available talent and resources and uses them to their fullest capacity. In the next 20 minutes or so, I want to talk to all of you how each of us can be the one in aviation and aerospace and create opportunity, prosperity, and an elite workforce right here in Oklahoma. An action plan, if you will, that can help develop and cultivate an endless pipeline of talent to continue to fortify Oklahoma's stronghold as a global leader in aviation and aerospace. Well, how, you say? Let me tell you what I'm thinking about. 15 years ago, when I first moved to Oklahoma, I heard about a culture in the Sooner State referred to as the Oklahoma Standard. I quickly learned that in times of crisis, if our state needed something, it reached out to its community, its gatekeepers, and lo and behold, whatever is needed seems to materialize. As all of you know, the generosity of the Oklahoma residents, it isn't an urban legend or a one-off. Time and time again, I've experienced this pitching in attitude across our Big Sky state. So I started thinking, what if the same Oklahoma Standard mindset could be applied to our STEM community? Specifically, the 6,700 STEM jobs that our state will need to fill annually for the next decade. What if all of us in aviation and aerospace put out an ask to our fellow Oklahomans and requested that whenever they cross paths with anyone who has an aptitude, an interest, an aspiration in science, tech, engineering, or math, that they would step up and lend a hand to help that individual in any way they could with pursuing that goal. What kind of impact would a mindset like that have on creating a much in demand workforce to fill the upcoming shortages in our aerospace industry? Is it possible that this simple act, the act of being the one to someone, could fortify Oklahoma's position as the aviation, aerospace capital of the planet? Why not, right? What if we shifted our thinking and approached every STEMinist, anyone not like the group, regardless of gender, race, socioeconomic background, hair color? What if we approached every STEMinist as an asset, like an integral player on a BCS championship team, instead of outsiders, oddballs, and at times, perhaps even threats? Recently, I was invited to the Naval Air Station Oceana in Virginia Beach for a world-class STEM day where all the 5th through 7th graders in the state participated. And as luck or fate would have it, I wound up sitting next to a program manager from NASA, a man who was heading one of the teams working on Mission Mars. As the Blue Angels were getting ready to perform, my seatmate and I exchanged, some idle chit-chat. And after the typical talk about the weather icebreakers, I noticed he had a look on his face, like he was weighing something he wasn't sure about, something I guessed he wanted to ask me. But since we had just met, he probably wasn't sure how I would react. So I waited, captivated and completely awestruck by the Blues flight formations. And halfway through the air show, that program manager from NASA, he nudged my arm. When I turned to look at him, he had a very serious look on his face. "Can I ask you a question?" he said. "Sure," I answered, "of course." He proceeded to tell me that he had this awesome woman on his team. She was incredibly smart, naturally. That's why he had hired her. But he also said she had this way about her, this uncommon skill of being able to work seamlessly with her male peers, with a sort of confidence, a humble pride, he called it, that not only made his job easier, but also, according to him, made his team more focused and productive, to the extent that they were actually ahead on some of their mission targets. Wanting to help his fellow program managers who hadn't had the same kind of success on their teams, he asked this woman if she would share some of her experiences, her approaches, her tactics with the other groups. She agreed, reluctantly, and after sensing her discomfort, he asked her to run the presentation by him before she spoke to the other teams. But after reading her notes, he said he was stunned. She wrote a polished, well-thought-out PowerPoint, as he would have expected. But surprisingly, she left out all the skills and traits he had admired so much about her, the very things he considered her assets, the unique traits she brought to the table. So he hauled her in and said, "Hey, what the heck? This isn't how you do your job." And you want to know what happened? He said that confident, rock star employee actually cowered in her chair get it, he said to me. Why would she do that? Downplay her strengths. The program manager peeled off his sunglasses and stared straight into my eyes, dumbfounded. I smiled. I smiled because although evading him, to me, her behavior was obvious. I first verified that this woman was near my age, and after confirming she was, I was certain of my hypothesis. I explained to that program manager that my generation of STEMinists, people who were different than the masses, were taught it's okay for us to join the group if we were uber qualified, quiet, kept to ourselves, and didn't draw any unnecessary attention. So the absolute last thing someone like us would do would be to highlight our strengths to our peers. You know, a sheer look of amazement cast over his face, and he told me that not in a million years would he have ever come to that conclusion. The program manager reached over and squeezed my shoulder. I am so glad to hear you say that, he said, because something in my gut told me I needed to go back and tell her to rewrite the presentation. This time, including all the strengths she brought to our team. And after she gave that talk to all the other groups, he said an incredible thing happened. He said he saw a shift in her, an elevated level of humble pride, one that not only helped him, but everyone around her. Now, this program manager from NASA is obviously someone who is sure-footed in his skills, with the yearning to be better. He clearly has an insatiable desire to not only personally succeed, but to elevate the entire group around him. He is someone who put the success of Mission Mars first, ahead of his ego. He undoubtedly has a ton of experience, but he didn't allow how things have always been done to cloud his forward thinking. He is a seeker that sees potential ahead of obstacles and uses all available talent and resources for best practices. He was the one to this woman. I had a similar experience quite some time ago. His name was Ed Forst, and he was the one for me. I was flying for Kimberly Clark's Midwest Express Airlines in the early 90s, selling commercial real estate on the side, since commuter airlines only paid about $15,000 a year back then, and that was before taxes. I was tired, beaten down, disillusioned, even teetering on letting my passion for flying go in exchange for a stable job in real estate where I would see others like me and live beyond, scraping by paycheck to paycheck. I was days from putting in my notice at Midwest Express when I got a call from a headhunting firm about a flying job, a corporate flying job in a jet, with a starting salary that would allow me to work just one job at a time. Although my mind was half already made up to switch to a career in real estate, I reluctantly agreed to go on the interview. What did I have to lose? And after doing a bunch of research, I learned that the garbage company searching for a pilot was currently a public company trading on the New York Stock Exchange, but its roots came from a string of family-owned trash businesses that had held the waste removal contracts in the city of Chicago for decades. Undoubtedly an old school culture, likely a close-knit boys' club. And I immediately wondered if the chief pilot that was doing the hiring realized that I was a woman. You see, as you guys know now, back then, my name was Erin, and still was then, but in those days, if identified solely by name, I was oftentimes mistaken as a man. So I showed up for the interview, not really expecting very much. And then when I walked into the hangar, very similar to this, I was met by a man with a warm smile and a hearty handshake. We went into his office and sat on either side of his desk. Ed Forst, the director of aviation, wasted no time before explaining to me that the management at the company really wasn't all that crazy about hiring a woman pilot. As a matter of fact, he said the CEO's wife forbid any females from flying the chairman's jet. But they had 2 other jets. And Ed was convinced that in order for his flight department to be world class, he needed to diversify his pilot group. No pressure there, right? I'll have to admit, being where I was at that time, weary from my journey in the unconventional, I wasn't sure I was up for such an important task. But Ed went on to tell me that he had researched my background heavily. He had talked to every reference I had given, even asked my references or references. He said he had a lot riding on this hire. From across his desk, Ed's eyes locked on mine. He pushed back from his chair and stood. And you want to know what? I'm absolutely sure I cowered in my chair. When he said the next part, though, I understood the formality. He told me he was 100% confident that I was the pilot for the job. The person he was convinced that had both the flying skills and the social skills to get along and elevate a group, his group, of highly experienced veteran pilots. I gotta tell you, his words penetrated like some superhuman, superpower shot of adrenaline, immediately whisking away all my weariness. In that moment, any thought of doing anything but flying left my brain completely. Without hesitating, I stood, reached out, and shook his hand, accepting the challenge. Ed was obviously on very stable footing, knowingly going against the sentiments of his bosses. He yearned to improve, putting the betterment of his pilot group ahead of his ego. He was a visionary in an archaic environment who was looking forward. He saw potential regardless of gender, race, and socioeconomic circumstances, and used all available talent and resources he could seek out. Understand that at this point in my life, I had 10 years invested in the aviation industry and flown with hundreds of pilots. No one had once ever said anything remotely that encouraging to me. And if it wasn't for him, I'd likely not be standing in front of you right now. Ed Forst was the one to me. I'm sharing these stories because I believe we all have the capability to be the one. Every single one of us, if we choose. Let me tell you how. First, always look for strengths ahead of weaknesses. Identifying weaknesses is important. But if you cultivate strengths, Weaknesses oftentimes organically elevate themselves. Number 2, evaluate every situation on its own merit. Listen, we've all had bad experiences. We've all been disappointed. We've all been disrespected. But don't let those events close your mind. Each situation, each person is different. Number 3, this is my favorite. Remember what it feels like to be a beginner. If you've forgotten what it feels like, go out and try something you have absolutely no experience or skill at. Work until you master that new skill. Go to a place where there's no one or very few like you. Take the opportunity to put yourself in someone else's flight suit. Remembering that when we strive for excellence, being the one, we have to push ourselves, which means stepping out of our comfort zones and becoming beginners over and over again. Number 4, understand that it is not your job to change or mentor everyone. If you don't have the interest, the desire, the social skills to mentor, you can still be the one to someone. By not putting up barriers or obstacles for the up-and-comers. This act in itself is invaluable. You can be the one simply by being a fair, balanced, competent, and sure-footed professional. Number 5, change the tape. Please be mindful of your words. Consider that if we are the best versions of ourselves, if we set standards with our language and our actions, that everyone around us will step up and be better. It is a fact that there are far less miscommunications in respectful and balanced environments because the energy in the group is sincere and genuine. Speaking of communication, I'd feel remiss without talking to you about this issue. Many of the managers, captains, crew chiefs, commanders, leaders I cross paths with say to me, hey Aaron, I'd sure love to be a mentor, be the one to a STEMinist in my group, but I'm afraid of misstepping, saying or doing something that she might misinterpret or think inappropriate. And I get this. This concern is real and valid. But there's a real simple way to figure out what's appropriate and what's not, and how it will be received. You have to figure out the motive behind the message, the spirit behind your words. And you can easily accomplish this by just doing a dry run, by repeating whatever you want to say in your head before speaking it out loud. And after you're through with this exercise, ask yourself this question: how did you feel, physically feel, when rehearsing it? Did you feel calm and constructive? Did you feel uncomfortable or anxious? A little angry, maybe resentful, irritated, or maybe even punitive? Will what you are about to say move the receiver closer to or further away from the goal at hand? Because if you have noble intentions behind your messages and your actions, my experiences have been that it will never be misinterpreted. In fact, it'll be welcomed. So leaders, if you're unsure, do a dry run. Be honest about the intent of your words. 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 and let that filter be your mentor compass. I'd like to take another quick minute to speak to anyone in the room who is not like the group, the ones I've been loosely referring to as STEMinists. Understand that if you choose to be in the unconventional, that choice is going to come with some responsibility. If you want to be treated as equals, you must be equally prepared. It's not enough to have a passion for a STEM career. You must hunker down and be sure you know your stuff. Yes, I had a passion for flying. Yes, some might even say I had an aptitude for it. But how do you think I would have been received by my peers, by Ed, if I rolled up on the ramp without preparation? If I didn't have deep knowledge of engines, electronics, hydraulics, pneumatics, what would I have brought to the table? Just remember, when you're pursuing your dream in the unconventional, and I want you to pursue those dreams, but just make sure you step up and pull your weight. Optimal utilization of all available resources, the essence of the Oklahoma standard. That's what I believe we need to fill and meet our upcoming industry demands. And the truth is, we need to include everyone who's interested. Since in my experience, diversity in teams, and apparently someone at NASA's too, elevates all of us to a higher level. Now, I'm not just talking out my blowhole on this point or giving you guys some Saturday morning kumbaya lip service. For 30 years now, I have flown in hundreds of flight crews, and I can unequivocally say that operationally, the best crews, teams, ground support, engineers, mechanics, dispatch ops, air traffic controllers that I have been acquainted with are comprised of teams of men and women. We both bring a different but equally valuable set of skills to the ramp. So on this day, the first of its kind in the great state of Oklahoma, I have a challenge for all of you. Is anybody up for it? All right, so when the opportunity presents itself for you to step up and be the one to someone, take that challenge. Take that challenge. And remember, all of you who are in and up and coming in industry right now, there are other people behind you looking up to you. So make sure you keep your eyes and ears open and understand that you are the one to them just by being you. I want to thank you very much for your time and your undivided attention. I hope all your days are filled with clear skies and tailwinds. Thank you very much.
I'm Lisa Jewett. I am the OAOA president this year. We have a couple recognitions. First of all, I want to thank you, Evan. This is an amazing facility. Thank you very much. We want to thank Jimmy's Egg. That was a great breakfast. We want to say thank you to our sponsors this year. Without you guys, this probably wouldn't have happened. You helped us financially reach our goal for our budget. I want to thank...
if you're here, please stand up.
Yes, KSA. Anybody here from KSA? Lochner. Thank you guys. CP&Y. Thank you. Barber. Delta Airports. Williams. Guthrie Edmond. Art Gilbreth. American Airlines. OAC. And I want to say a special thank you to Sandra She has been so wonderful helping us put this together. And Christy Slater. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for coming. We're hoping that this is even bigger and better next year. Thank you.
Good morning again, everybody. So I've got the easy job of dismissal. After hearing all the great speakers today, I'm glad I was last. I said all the things I don't need to say. But I will be very brief since we're getting close to leaving here. I just wanted to say that I didn't previously have a background in aviation before I started working for Atlantic Aviation. It's been an amazing company to work for, and I've had a lot of opportunities and none that I would have ever dreamed of as a kid. In my home, we didn't discuss aviation as a career path for myself or my sister, or any of my siblings for that matter. But yet I'm here and I love it. My wonderful husband's here to support me today. In his household, they did, talk about aviation because he's a guy, and it worked out for him as well as works for Tinker. So our children will have that conversation, probably more than a lot of other homes. But I just want to make sure that you get the word out there, because aviation has no age, gender, or any of those other things that people talked about today. And it's true. You can start very early or late. I see it every day. Flight students from high school, you see retired people in flight school these days. So just want to make sure that we keep promoting it.
Thank you so much to Rooted in Aviation. As a person with a non-aviation background, I'm in awe of all of you. I'm going to get a pilot's license. It just may take a few years because I'm afraid to fly. But it's going to be okay. With Senator Pugh encouragement, I think I can do it. So we're going to take this out, of course, with a song. You can't have an Oklahoma event and not have a song, can you? Okay, so everyone stand up for me.